The silence before the words, the auditorium was full, and yet it felt like silence was waiting in the corners. Cameras pointed from every side, lights shined on the stage, and people leaned forward, waiting for something more than a speech. It was the day when Sundar Pichai stood beside Narendra Modi, and everyone believed it would be just another event of words and smiles. But deep inside, something unusual was about to unfold, something that no one expected. Sundar adjusted his glasses, his voice calm but trembling slightly. He began to share his journey, his words simple, but his heart heavy. He spoke about his childhood, the narrow streets of Chennai and the small house where dreams seemed too big for the walls to hold. He spoke about his mother, Lakhmi Pichai, and how she silently carried the weight of sacrifices that he only began to understand years later. The audience listened, but Narendra Modi's eyes stayed locked on Sundar, sensing there was more behind each word. Then Sundar paused. His silence was not empty. It carried a storm inside it. People looked at each other, wondering why his voice broke. And then he said something that made the hall breathe differently. I stand here today because of my mother. She gave up things she never told anyone about, just so I could study, just so I could dream. When I left India, I did not realize the depth of her sacrifice. But when I returned years later, I saw the lines on her face, the tired hands, and I knew. Her silent strength built everything I am today. The hall grew still. Some felt their throats tighten, some lowered their eyes. The story was not about success now. It was about pain, love, and the weight of respect. Sundar's voice softened even more as he looked at Narendra Modi. Prime Minister Ji, when I meet young people, they ask me about technology, about Google, about the future. But inside, I feel the greatest lesson is not in technology. It is in the strength of silent sacrifices. My mother taught me what resilience truly means. And today, I share this not as a CEO, not as a leader, but as a son. Narendra Modi leaned forward, his expression serious, his eyes reflecting the emotion in Sundar's voice. He could have responded quickly, like leaders often do, with polite words or a smile. But instead, he stayed quiet for a moment, letting the weight of Sundar's words fill the hall. The crowd watched both men closely. There was tension, but it was not the kind that divides. It was the kind that connects hearts in silence. People waited, unsure what Modi would say. They expected something formal, something diplomatic. But inside, they felt that this moment was different. Modi slowly took the microphone. His voice was calm, but there was a deep weight in it. Sundar, what you said is not just your story. It is the story of India. Mothers across this nation carry the same sacrifice in silence. They may not speak of it, but they are the foundation of every dream that grows. Your success shines today because of her quiet strength, and this lesson, more than any technology, is what we must never forget. The audience gasped. It was not just an answer. It was a mirror held to every person sitting there. People thought of their own mothers, of sacrifices they never thanked enough. The hall felt heavy with emotion, as if everyone was breathing the same memory at once. Sundar lowered his head for a moment, his eyes moist. He had expected a response, but not this one. Narendra Modi had turned his personal story into a lesson for everyone. It was no longer about one man's mother, but about millions of mothers whose love and pain never reached the headlines. The suspense of the moment pulled the audience deeper. Would Sundar reply again? Would he break the silence further? No one knew. But everyone understood that something powerful had already begun, something that would not end with this one exchange. And so the story of that day started to take shape, not of technology or speeches, but of respect, humility, resilience, and kindness, woven together in a way that no one could walk away from unchanged. The weight of silence, the audience sat frozen. Some people whispered quietly, but most stayed silent, as if afraid that even a small sound would break the fragile air between Sundar Pichai and Narendra Modi. The Prime Minister's words had already touched hearts, but people sensed he was not finished. He looked at Sundar for a long moment, almost as if he was looking past him, into the story of every Indian family. Narendra Modi leaned closer to the microphone. His voice was steady, but softer than before, carrying a tone that was rare for a leader. "Sundar," he said, "when you speak of your mother, I see my own mother's face. I see her waking up before the sun, working with her hands, never asking for anything. I see the same struggle that countless mothers face across this country. Their sacrifices are invisible, yet they shape the destiny of our nation." A hush swept across the hall. People expected political words, something polished. But these were raw, personal words. The crowd did not see a prime minister speaking to a CEO. They saw one son speaking to another. Sundar's eyes widened. For the first time that day, his carefully calm expression cracked. He had carried the weight of his story alone for so long, but now he realized he was not alone. Modi's words did not only honor his mother, they honored every sacrifice that had gone unnoticed, every silent battle fought in kitchens, in farms, in small homes where dreams were often too expensive. A young student in the audience felt her eyes burn. She thought of her mother, who ironed clothes late into the night just to pay for her education. A businessman at the back of the hall clenched his fists, suddenly remembering how he had once argued with his mother for being too simple, forgetting she had been the reason he could even build his career. The air was heavy, but inside that weight, there was power. Narendra Modi paused and looked at the crowd. "Today, I want every person sitting here to carry this truth home," he continued. "Success is not just about skill or intelligence. It is about remembering the hands that held you when you were weak, the voice that encouraged you when you doubted yourself, and the quiet sacrifices that gave you strength. If we forget that, we forget the root of who we are." The hall broke into applause, but it was not the usual applause of routine speeches. It was slower, heavier, filled with emotion. Each clap felt like a way to release the tension in their hearts. Sundar stood still, his eyes moist, his lips pressed tight as he absorbed every word. Then, unexpectedly, Sundar raised the microphone again. His voice was lower, almost trembling. "Prime Minister Ji," he said, "when you speak this way, I feel as if my mother is standing here. I never told her enough. I never said thank you enough. Sometimes, when I sit in my office, surrounded by everything people call success, I feel the emptiness of not having told her what she truly deserved to hear. Do you know what hurts me the most? I gave her the world, but I forgot to give her words." His voice cracked, and the audience gasped. No one expected Sundar Pichai, one of the most powerful men in technology, to show such raw vulnerability on stage. Some people put their hands over their mouths. Others lowered their eyes, unable to hold back their own tears. Narendra Modi nodded slowly, his eyes filled with respect. "That pain you carry is the reminder of love," he said gently. "And today, by speaking it here, you have already given your mother the words she waited her whole life to hear. Do not think it is too late. Every son who remembers his mother with respect brings her peace, no matter where she is." The crowd grew emotional again, and some could no longer control their tears. It was not just Sundar's story anymore, it had become their story. And yet, beneath all this emotion, there was still a sense of suspense. Because everyone could feel that this moment was only leading to something bigger. Narendra Modi was not only responding to Sundar Pichai, he was building toward a lesson that would shake every heart in that hall. The unexpected lesson. The silence in the hall grew heavier. Even the cameras seemed to move slower, as if afraid to disturb the air. Narendra Modi stood quietly, looking not just at Sundar Pichai, but at the thousands of faces before him. He could see their emotions, some eyes wet with tears, some filled with memories, some weighed down by unspoken guilt. Then, with a deep breath, Modi began to speak again. "All of us," he said, "carry unspoken debts in our hearts, debts we can never fully repay. They are not about money, not about gifts, but about time, care, and sacrifice. Sundar speaks of his mother. I spoke of mine. But the truth is, every one of you has someone whose sacrifices built your path. The question is, have you ever looked into their eyes and said what you should have said?" A murmur passed through the crowd. His words were not soft anymore. They were sharp, piercing, almost accusing. People shifted in their seats. Many lowered their heads. A few bit their lips, holding back emotions they did not expect to feel in a hall meant for technology and speeches. Sundar stood frozen, every muscle tight. The words struck him like arrows, not because they were harsh, but because they were true. He remembered late nights when his mother sat by a dim lamp, waiting for him to finish studying. He remembered times when she skipped meals so he could eat properly before school. He remembered her smile when he first left for America, hiding tears that fell after the bus turned away. And he realized he never told her enough. Narendra Modi raised his hand, pointing gently toward the audience. "You, the young student sitting in the third row. You, the father with your son beside you. You, the leaders, the professionals, the dreamers. Success will come and go. Technology will rise and fall. But if you forget to show gratitude, if you forget to honor the ones who built your strength, then no achievement will ever feel complete." The words fell like heavy stones, breaking open hidden places in people's hearts. Some quietly wiped their eyes. Some pressed their palms together in silent respect. Others sat still, breathing deeply, as if afraid to let their emotions spill. Then, Modi turned back to Sundar. His tone softened again, like a father speaking to a son. "Sundar, you carry guilt for not saying enough to your mother. But today, you are not alone. Every person here carries the same guilt in some form. But this moment is a chance for change. By speaking your truth, you have opened a door for others to do the same. Do you see it? Your vulnerability has become your strength." Sundar's lips trembled. He looked down at his hands, then at the audience, and finally at Modi. His voice shook when he replied, "Prime Minister Ji, I never thought my personal story would matter to anyone else. But today, hearing you, I realize it is bigger than me. Maybe this was the lesson I needed. That no success can shine brighter than the respect we show to the people who shaped us." The crowd broke into applause again, this time stronger, but not wild. It was the kind of applause that carried meaning. Each clap was heavy with respect, with understanding, with shared pain. And then, just as the applause softened, something unexpected happened. A young woman stood up from the back row. Her voice trembled, but was strong enough to carry through the hall. "Prime Minister Ji, may I say something?" The crowd gasped. No one expected an audience member to speak in such a moment. Security looked tense, but Modi raised his hand calmly, signaling for silence. He nodded gently. "Yes, Beta, speak." The young woman's hands shook as she held the microphone passed to her. "I am here today because of my mother, too. She works as a maid. She hides her pain from me every day. I came here only to listen to Sundar, sir. But now, I realize I never once told her that she is my hero. Tonight, I will go home and tell her. Thank you for reminding me." Tears filled the eyes of many. Sundar himself pressed his palms together and bowed slightly toward the girl. Modi's face softened with a rare smile. This, Modi said, is why we speak of truth. When one heart opens, many others follow. When one story is shared, it becomes everyone's story. The suspense in the hall now felt like a rising tide. People could sense that this exchange was moving towards something larger than a speech, larger than a single story. It was becoming a collective lesson, a mirror for every soul present, the challenge of true success. The hall was still heavy with the young woman's words. Her courage had broken a wall inside the room, and everyone felt it. Narendra Modi looked at her for a moment, then at Sundar Pichai, and then he turned his gaze across the hall as if he was speaking to each person one by one. His voice was calm but steady. "We speak often of success," he said. "We celebrate it. We chase it. We even measure ourselves against it. But today, I ask you, what is true success? Is it money? Is it position? Is it recognition? Or is it something deeper, something quieter, like the respect we show to those who built us?" The question cut deep. People who had come expecting technology talks now found themselves questioning their own lives. A businessman in the audience thought of his father, who had built a small shop brick by brick, while he now ran a large company but rarely visited his father. A student remembered ignoring her grandmother's advice, only to realize it had always been given with love. Sundar Pichai stood still, his chest heavy, because even though he had reached the peak of success in the world's eyes, he knew that inside, Modi's question unsettled him. He had built innovations, led thousands of employees, and shaped the future of technology. But could he really say he had honored the foundation of his own life as much as it deserved? Narendra Modi stepped forward, his tone more direct now. "Sundar," he said, "your story is powerful because it carries guilt, humility, and love. But I ask you this, if you had the chance to speak to your mother again, what would you say? Would you speak of Google, of Silicon Valley, of achievements? Or would you speak only of love and gratitude?" The hall grew tense. Sundar's lips parted, but no words came at first. The silence itself became an answer. Finally, his voice cracked softly. "I would only say thank you. I would only say I am sorry for not saying it enough when she was alive. All the rest, the titles, the companies, the awards, none of it matters before her sacrifice." The crowd inhaled sharply, some covering their mouths as tears escaped. It was not just Sundar's confession, it was theirs too. Everyone in that room carried an unspoken regret of words never said, love never shown. Narendra Modi nodded slowly, as though he had been waiting for that answer. "That," he said firmly, "is the lesson. True success is not in what the world remembers you for, but in what you remember to honor. You may build towers that touch the sky, but if you forget the roots that held you when you were small, the tower will never truly stand tall." The audience erupted into applause, not just clapping but rising to their feet. It was not applause for a speech. It was applause for truth that shook their hearts. But Modi was not finished. His voice rose above the claps. "And let this not end here. Tonight, when you return home, call your mother, your father, your teacher, anyone who shaped you. Do not wait until regret becomes heavier than words. Gratitude unspoken is a wound that never heals." A wave of emotion spread through the hall. People were already reaching for their phones, some sending quick messages to their parents, some whispering prayers in their hearts for those no longer alive. Sundar closed his eyes. For the first time in years, he felt lighter, as if speaking his guilt aloud and hearing Modi's lesson had unlocked something inside him. But he also felt something else, an inner challenge, a call to action. Modi's words were not only a comfort, they were a responsibility. The suspense thickened. What would Sundar do next? Would he respond again or stay quiet, letting the moment breathe? People leaned forward, eager, because they sensed the story was moving towards something even deeper, something that would not only touch hearts but push them to act. The response of the heart. The applause slowed and the hall sank into silence again. All eyes turned back to Sundar Pichai. The weight of Narendra Modi's challenge pressed on him like a mountain. His chest rose and fell as he took a deep breath, his fingers tightening around the microphone. His voice, when it finally came, was soft but clear. Prime Minister Ji, your words have touched me deeply. I have carried this guilt quietly for years, but today I feel something different. I feel that maybe my story can become more than just my pain. Maybe it can remind others not to make the same mistake I did. I cannot change the past, but perhaps I can give meaning to it. The hall listened with breathless attention. Sundar's face showed no sign of the polished calm of a CEO. He looked vulnerable, human, like any other son who had lost his chance to say enough. He continued, I want to make a promise today, not only to my mother's memory, but to every parent who sacrifices in silence. I promise that I will use whatever platform I have, whatever power I hold, to remind the world that success is incomplete without respect. I want young people not just to dream big, but to love bigger. I want them to know that the hands that feed them, guide them, and hold them are more valuable than any invention they may build. The words landed heavy and beautiful at the same time. The audience sat still, many crying quietly. It was no longer just a talk. It had become a confession, a vow, a lesson wrapped in raw emotion. Narendra Modi nodded with deep respect, his eyes holding pride. This is the answer I hoped you would find, Sundar, he said gently. When leaders speak with truth, people listen. But when leaders speak with heart, people change. Today you have chosen the heart. The hall broke into applause again, but this time it was louder, stronger, unstoppable. Some stood on their feet, clapping with tears on their faces. Others pressed their palms together in silent prayer. The sound shook the walls, as if every clap carried a story of its own. Then, as the clapping softened, something unexpected happened again. An elderly man stood slowly in the middle rows. His hair was white, his hands shaky, but his voice was firm. I am a retired teacher, he said, and I have lived my whole life teaching children. Many of my students are successful today, some even famous. But do you know what hurts me? Very few ever looked back to say thank you. Today, listening to you both, I feel seen after so many years. I feel that maybe, finally, our silent sacrifices as teachers are being honored. The hall turned to look at him, and for a moment, no one spoke. Sundar placed his hand on his chest and bowed slightly in respect. Narendra Modi looked at the man and said warmly, Guru is above even God in our culture. Your words remind us that teachers too are parents of the soul. And today, on this stage, we honor you. Applause thundered again, even louder than before. Some students in the audience shouted, Thank you, sir, toward the teacher. The man wiped his eyes and sat down, his shoulders lighter than when he had stood. The energy in the room had shifted. It was no longer just a dialogue between Sundar and Modi. It had become a collective awakening. Every voice that rose added more depth, more humanity, more truth. And yet, beneath all the applause and emotion, there was still a question lingering. What final lesson would come from this? The audience sensed that something even bigger was waiting to be said, something that would turn the entire day into a story people would tell for years. The seal of wisdom. The hall was alive with emotion but quiet at the same time. It was a strange balance, as if people were breathing heavily yet holding their breath together. Sundar Pichai had spoken his vow. The young girl had spoken her truth, and even the retired teacher had found his voice. Now, all eyes returned to Narendra Modi. He stood calmly, waiting for the room to settle. His silence itself carried power, and when he finally raised the microphone, the air seemed to tighten. "Today," he began slowly, "we have spoken of mothers, of sacrifices, of gratitude. We have spoken of what it means to be human beyond success. But I want to give you all something that will stay in your hearts longer than applause, longer than speeches, longer than any achievement." The audience leaned forward. Sundar's hands pressed together unconsciously, as though bracing for something heavy. Modi's eyes scanned the hall. "In life, remember 3 things. First, respect the roots that gave you strength. Second, use your success not only for yourself, but to lift others. And third, never let silence steal your gratitude. Speak it while you can. Speak it before time makes you regret it." The hall was silent again, but it was not empty silence. It was a silence filled with weight, filled with truth. Many people wiped their faces quietly. Then Modi looked directly at Sundar. "You have shown courage today, Sundar, by sharing not your titles, not your victories, but your pain. That is true leadership. People follow not when you show them power, but when you show them humility. And remember this, your mother's story is not only yours now, it belongs to everyone who listens to you. Carry it with honor, for in her sacrifice lives the strength of millions." Sundar's throat tightened. Tears finally slipped from his eyes, and he did not hide them. He bowed deeply, pressing his palms together toward Modi, toward the audience, and perhaps toward the memory of his mother. The crowd rose to their feet in unison. It was no longer applause for a leader or a CEO. It was applause for truth, for wisdom, for the raw reminder that success without respect is hollow. The sound filled the auditorium, echoing like thunder, rolling over every heart inside. And then, as the applause softened, a stillness took over again. Modi lifted his hand gently. "This moment must not end here," he said. "Each of you, when you leave this hall, carry these words with you. Do not wait for stages or microphones to honor the people who built you. Do it today. Do it tonight. Do it every chance you get. Because the true measure of your life will not be how far you reach, but how deeply you remember." The audience stood in silence, their hands folded, their hearts heavy but full. Sundar's voice broke through softly, almost like a whisper, but carried by microphones so everyone could hear. "Prime Minister Ji, today you have given me something greater than honor. You have given me peace. I feel as though my mother's soul has heard these words through me." The hall trembled with emotion once more. People looked at Sundar, not as the CEO of Google, but as a son who had finally found healing. The suspense hung heavy again. Everyone felt that the story was reaching its peak, but also sensed there was still one final chapter left, a moment that would complete the circle, a conclusion that would turn this gathering into history. The final echo. The hall was still. Everyone knew the story was not finished yet, but no one could predict how it would end. Sundar Pichai stood with tears still glistening in his eyes. Narendra Modi stood firm yet gentle, and the audience waited, their hearts open, their souls raw. Narendra Modi looked across the room, his eyes slow and steady, as if he was not just looking at faces but at lives. "Today, we have spoken with truth," he said, his voice low but filled with strength. "But truth is not enough unless it becomes action. Words without action are like a lamp without fire. They cannot light the darkness." The audience leaned in. Many felt their hearts pounding, as though they were about to receive something they would carry for the rest of their lives. Modi continued. "So I ask all of you for one promise. Tonight, before you sleep, Tell one person who shaped you that you are grateful. Tell them with your voice, not with silence. If they are no longer here, then close your eyes and say it to their memory. Do not wait. Do not let regret be your companion. The hall was completely silent now, every word sinking deep. Some people already clutched their phones, waiting for the moment to call home. Others lowered their heads in prayer. Then Modi turned toward Sundar. And Sundar, your mother may not be here to hear your words, but her soul is not far. Today, through this stage, through these people, through your own tears, she has heard you, and she is proud. Remember this not as guilt, but as a lesson. Live in a way that her sacrifice continues to shine through you. Sundar's chest shook as he held back a sob, but he could not hold it forever. Tears ran freely, and he pressed his palms together, bowing deeply before the audience and the Prime Minister. "Thank you," he whispered, his voice breaking. "Thank you for giving my mother's story a voice greater than mine. I will never forget this day." The audience rose to their feet once more, but this time it was different. It was not loud applause. It was a slow, respectful clapping, like 1,000 hearts beating in the same rhythm. Some cried openly, others smiled through their tears, but all of them felt changed. Then, as the sound filled the hall, Narendra Modi raised his hand one last time. "Remember," he said firmly, "the world will remember you for your success, but the heavens will remember you for your gratitude. Never forget which one matters more." Those words hung in the air like the final note of a song. They did not fade quickly. They stayed, echoing in every heart, heavy and unforgettable. Sundar closed his eyes and breathed deeply. For the first time in years, he felt peace replacing guilt. The story of his mother had not ended. It had become part of something greater. It had become a lesson for millions. The audience slowly left the hall, but they carried something invisible with them. Many picked up their phones that very night, calling their parents, their teachers, their loved ones. Words that had been buried for years finally found life. And so, what began as a speech between a CEO and a prime minister ended as something far bigger. It became a reminder that success without gratitude is incomplete, that humility carries more power than pride, and that kindness is the language every heart understands. Long after the lights dimmed, long after the microphones were silent, the echo of those words lived on, in homes, in families, in silent prayers whispered by sons and daughters across the nation.